Welcome back to the Ghost Bunny Podcast. I'm your host, Bridget Marcourt, with a brand new episode for you guys. My guest today is Richard Estep. Richard Estep is the author of more than 30 books in genres ranging from ghosts and hauntings to cryptids and UFOs to military history and true crime. He is a series regular on the TV shows Paranormal 911, Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal Night Shift, and Haunted Case Files. Richard has guested on the shows Destination Fear and A Haunting. The Hulu docuseries The Fox Hollow Murders is partially based on his book, The Horrors of Fox Hollow Farm. He is a regular columnist for Haunted Magazine and regularly presents at conferences and public events across the United States and in the UK. English by birth, Richard lives in the adopted Colorado, where he serves as a 911 paramedic. In his free time, he can usually be found reading, writing, or fussing with his dog. Visit him at richardestep.net. And I'm so excited to have him on the podcast today. Richard, thank you so much for doing the show today.
Hi, Bridget. It's a pleasure to be back.
Yes. So you are actually the first one I'm recording in this new little setup I have here.
I like it. Very ghosty from what I can see, and lots of books in the background.
There are lots of books, and those are all real books. But I always have to bring a ghost with me everywhere I go, because it wouldn't be a paranormal podcast if we didn't have a ghost on it, right?
Absolutely not. And he looks quite happy too, or she, can't tell which, but yeah, happy looking ghost.
It's a happy ghost. I only surround myself with happy ghosts. Oh, and I wanted to show you too. Did you see the shirt I'm wearing?
Blucifer. That's Blucifer.
It is Denver Airport, and I might as well just start with that, because obviously you're in Colorado. You've been in and out of the Denver Airport. What is up with the Denver Airport?
Well, I mean,
have you done stories on this at all?
Yeah, I wrote a book about Colorado UFOs, and there are all these theories about Denver Airport for people that don't know that it's a secret Illuminati base, that there are reptilians there, that there are aliens underneath the airport. Lucifer the statue was the only statue I've ever heard of that killed its sculptor.
Right.
And so, supposed to be cursed. And I love the marketing people at Denver Airport because they are really leaning into it. You've seen the advertisements?
Yes.
And so, posters that say things like, sorry for the delay, the reptilians keep stealing our tools, which I think is fantastic.
It is they are so good about it, but it's also kind of like that thing, like you hide things in plain sight.
Yeah. Reverse psychology.
So, I know. And so I'm like, they aren't playing with us because they know we all know. But then at the same time, like, they are still hiding stuff. But that airport, you guys, it's crazy if you've never been. They also have gargoyles. Mm-hmm. They also have, I heard they took them out now, but there were big paintings of like the end of the world, like shit's on fire and like gas masks, and people are running for their lives and stuff in an airport.
And the gargoyle talks to you. Did you know that?
I've seen it, and I've seen it happen to people. Like, they say something about like your luggage or something like that, and people are like, wait, what?
It's fantastic. I love the way that we lean into the weird in Denver, and the airport is the best example of that.
It really is. And then there's like this like apocalyptic looking, I don't know what it is, like in the middle of the airport. Like, it almost looks like like an overgrown city that used to be but isn't anymore.
Yeah, and there's planes flying in. You have planes hanging from the ceiling, and it's always an adventure going to DIA, and they're still expanding it and making it bigger. So who knows?
Yeah, and then they have these. When I was there, it was just ladies. I don't know if it sometimes switches, but they were wearing like Daisy Duke style shorts, and they're older women too. They're wearing like Daisy Duke style shorts, like a little checkered button up top with like cleavage, pigtails, cowboy hat, and they'd be walking around going, "Huh, is there anything I can help you with?" They were just there to help, and they had like a very Texas accent, even though we're in Colorado. But they were just there to assist or help if you needed any information on where to go or help with your luggage, or you're missing your bag or something. I was like, oh, the hospitality here is
If I see one next time I'm there, and I fly out of there a lot, I'm going to approach one and just say, hello, could you direct me to the secret underground alien lair, please? And see if that works.
Yes, see what they say. But yes, Blucifer. Okay, before I even knew the story behind Blucifer, you guys, so when you're driving into the airport, in case you don't know, there is this giant, I mean, he's like, what, 20 feet tall?
Huge, with glowing red eyes.
Yes, a blue, like, I guess he's supposed to be maybe a Bronco because
Yeah,
the Denver Broncos.
yeah.
So he's a giant horse, though, and like you said, red glowing eyes. And I've always just like thought that was a horrible omen going into an airport. Like that's just I don't want to see him. He's scary looking, and going into an airport is the last time you want to see something like scary like that.
And
And
he's
then I
killed at
found
least one person.
yes, and then I hear the story that his head, the sculptor making him, the head fell off and killed the sculptor.
Yeah, and you know, if you're ever driving in or out of DIA and there's a lightning storm going on and you see Lucifer backlit by lightning, it is terrifying. You just kind of, and I love it, don't get me wrong, but you got to wonder how that got approval. Like, how are we going to terrify visitors to our state?
Yeah,
Giant
welcome to
demonic Bronco.
Denver. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then all of the rumors about the underground bunkers and the it goes to NORAD, I guess, supposedly.
It's the old baggage system, or that's what they tell people. It's the old automated luggage system is the story.
But I do remember hearing a story of somebody who like was nosing around a little bit and pretended to like get lost and go into like a kind of off limits area, and that literally ran into somebody with like a machine gun, like a military style person, and said, "You can't be in here." Like,
Yeah, I mean, maybe. And I've also heard stories of people going down, like way down in the elevator and encountering like reptilians or finding things. But the rumors about the airport's so cool. I mean, one of my favorites is the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yes.
There's a scene in that where the aliens are broadcasting like a series of numbers, and they turn out to be like a latitude and longitude, map coordinates. And so they all break into the boss's office, they steal his globe of the world, and they're figuring out where these coordinates are, In the movie, the numbers are like Devil's Tower, Wyoming. That's what sets up that cool thing at the end. But there's a theory out there, and it's not true. I'm so sad to tell you that those numbers are the coordinates for DIA, for Denver Airport. And a lot of people believe it to this day. In reality, because I checked, they take you to like a cornfield in the middle of nowhere, North Colorado, unfortunately. Wouldn't it be great if that was true?
It would be. Have you ever, because I would love to do a whole podcast with about the Denver airport, but like with the Denver airport people. Have you ever tried to talk to them? Like with even their marketing team? Like I would just love to like pick their brain about how they come up with these things and like what their philosophy is on it and stuff. I just feel like it'd be interesting to hear more from them.
I would just reach out to them, because I did when I wrote my UFO book. And this was before they were doing all of the new publicity stuff. So the response I got was very much a form letter, and you could almost hear the tone in the email of, "No, there are no aliens. There's no secret underground base." This was the 1,000th time they'd been asked. So, but since they started really, having fun with that idea and made a whole marketing campaign around it, I'm willing to bet they would talk to you. So reach out to them and see what happens. I would love to know.
Yeah, it would be so fun. I don't know if I told you the last time we spoke, because as we were saying before we were recording, it's been so long since I've seen you. But I don't know if I told you that my husband his family is from Colorado, and his dad grew up in Boulder and has a park named after him even there.
Oh.
Scott Carpenter Park.
I know Scott Carpenter. In fact, I've spent many a night parked there with my ambulance waiting for bad things to happen.
Oh, well, that's nice and bad. So that is my father-in-law. RIP. He's not with us anymore, but that's my father-in-law. And so we still to this day go to Colorado every summer to visit family. And Nick that's my husband, has a 500-acre ranch. Not just him, it's like the whole family owns this ranch, and it's just for cattle grazing. Like nobody lives on it or anything like that. But what we do once a year every summer is go camping on it. And he has found on there one time, because we're not there very often, but one summer he was there, a mutilated cow. And one night when we were camping, there was something very weird, lights-wise, kind of hovering in the distance. It looked like it was at the very end of the road that comes into the ranch, but it takes like 20 minutes to come down this bumpy dirt road down into the ranch. So imagine a 20-minute dirt road, how far that is away, it looked like they were just like, it almost looked like a drone, like somebody's drone, like just hanging out there at the end. But this would be like 10 o'clock at night in the middle of, it's like 45 minutes outside of Steamboat, like kind of middle of nowhere.
I believe it, because I mean, the original cattle mutilation story, the horse, I want to say it was Snippy. came from Colorado, from the San Luis Valley, which is well known for its UFO sightings and UFO hotspots. And I'm hearing more and more reports from people that live on the eastern plains of Colorado, away from all the city lights under those really dark skies. And they're seeing, they can't be drones. They're seeing just the weirdest lights in the sky, buzzing their farms and ranches and things like that. So, yeah. And then, of course, Red Rocks Arena, I'm sure you're very familiar with Red Rocks, had that massive UFO sighting. I think it was last year when all those people saw this enormous UFO in the skies above.
That just gives me chills because, yes, I remember that. And they were terrified.
Mhm.
They were terrified. And that is like when so many people see something like that, like you can't deny that. Like, they can't deny something's going on like that.
Yeah, I'm working on a book about UFOs, UAPs now to turn in next year. And the more you dig, the more interesting it gets.
Well, and I feel like the government is coming out with stuff saying, yes, the fighter pilots, they're showing the footage and stuff like that. But I feel like they always kind of put it out when like there's a lot going on. Like I remember a big one came out right during COVID and stuff. And then like another one came out like not too long. But and I feel like they're like admitting it now, but nobody's making any big deal about it.
It's really weird in that, yes, it's become so much more acceptable to talk about this kind of stuff. The military is openly saying these weird things, our jets chase them. We see them making moves that no human being could stand. They would be squished. But what's really kind of the big story here, in my opinion, is when the US government says we don't know what these things are, but they're in our airspace, their entire job of the US Air Force is protecting our airspace. You can't say that they're friendly. You can't say that they're not, unless they know something we don't, which I suspect they do.
I do.
You can't blow something off like that. It's the equivalent of saying, hey, Bridget, there's a strange man in your house. You don't know this guy, but it's fine. I wouldn't worry about it. I mean, like, you would start locking doors and be terrified. So in the past, the government policy has just been denial. There's nothing to this. There's nothing to be afraid of, even though there is report after report after report from military pilots, civilian pilots, very respectable people, trained observers. I have a friend who's an airline pilot himself that talks about seeing these strange lights out over the ocean, and other airline pilots talk about it. They have their own communications channel, which is like a common chat channel for pilots. And he said that they've been hearing a lot of chatter about these lights in the upper atmosphere, which are too high to be other planes, but don't behave like satellites. And how is this not a bigger news story when our own government says something's in our airspace, we don't know what it is, but let's not worry about it. No, let's worry about it.
What about all those drones off New Jersey?
And the stories we've heard range from they're Chinese, they're from a foreign government, that they're just commercial drones. Ridiculous. Some of them are supposed to be as big as cars, and they're absolutely silent. Like there's no propeller sound, there's no engine noise, multiple witnesses. And again, this common thread we keep seeing, they're happening in the airspace over military installations, which normally the US military, and quite understandably, would start shooting them down. If you're over a US military airbase, you're going to get shot down. But there are no reports out there of interceptions, of jets, shooting one of these things down. The whole thing just smells. It really does. It stinks.
The New Jersey one was very weird because I thought I heard Trump say later, like well after, kind of like, oh, it was our military and it was our own drones and we knew all about it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking nobody knew what was going on for the longest time and they just let it be. Nobody knew.
Well, and nobody knew. Every president ever, I'm not making this political, right? No matter whether you're talking Trump or Obama or Clinton or Bush, they all say, when they get into office, I'm going to put the truth out there about UFOs, about Roswell. And they all either say nothing or they say, yeah, there's nothing to it. It's like they get a briefing once they get the job. And it's like either they're not told, because there are some things that are so secret, so classified, that the president is not cleared to know them. Doesn't have a need to know them. This is fact. So you kind of wonder if it's gotten so compartmentalized. Because at the end of the day, Bridget, president is a part-time job, right? There are people in the intelligence community that spend 40 or 50 years, a lifetime, knowing stuff that the rest of us never find out. President's gone in 4 years or at most 8, right? Hopefully. That's the way it's supposed to work. And so I think a lot of the higher ups in the intelligence community see presidents as being a minor inconvenience at best. But yeah.
I think so too.
Jimmy Carter, I think, is the only one that came out and said that he saw a UFO and cannot explain it.
Wait, who said it?
Jimmy Carter did. He said very openly that he had a UFO sighting that he couldn't explain.
Yeah, I think they just don't tell the presidents, or they just give them very little information, like kind of something you could already gather for,
Yeah.
if you're into all of this stuff. But I don't think that they're told anything more than what we already know
No.
because of that, because they're going to be gone in a few years, and then loose lips sink ships, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'd be talking. Okay, 30 books.
42 now.
I'm trying to write one. I'm trying to write one. I can't even get it off the ground.
You'll get there. Keep at it. And if you need tips, give me a call and I'm happy to help. But yeah, I write every day. I write at least 1,000 words every day. I've done that for 15 years of my life, and that's how you end up with 44 books.
But do you think that sometimes your 1,000 words just a bunch of gibberish? Like, just there's days where things doesn't come to you,
You want to know
and
a
other
secret?
days, what?
They're usually gibberish. They're usually crap. And there are some people that would say they always are. But most writers will tell you they don't have to be 1,000 good words because you can edit. I mean, you've done work in TV. You're well versed in this, right? Raw footage is often crap too, but a good editor can turn that into something exceptional. A good chef can turn a bunch of eggs and ingredients into a beautiful, delicious dessert, correct? So what
Yeah.
I always tell people that are writing is you have this inner voice. It's your inner critic, and it's telling you, oh, this is garbage. Don't bother. Why waste your time? You'll never do this. You'll never finish a book. I've dealt with that 44 times, and it's still there. It never goes. But once you get to the finish, Bridget, and then usually put it in a drawer for 2 or 3 weeks and come back to it, and then you can edit it yourself, and then you turn it into a professional editor, and suddenly you've got a professional quality book. So I'm going to implore you, keep going, keep writing, drown that voice out, okay? Whatever it takes, get to the finish line on your book. And then I've seen a lot of people write 50% of a really good book, and it never saw the light of day. The worst book I ever wrote is better than the best one that I never finished. That's my advice.
Yeah. Wow, those are all good. That's all good advice. I feel like I just took a workshop.
And I love encouraging people to write. We all have stories to tell, and this is a time where we all have the ability to put those books out in front of other people for them to appreciate. So you, just like anybody, have, a valuable story that only you can tell. So don't let that inner critic prevent you from sharing that story with the world.
Yeah. When did you become a writer?
I started writing in 2013. I got my first book contract the year after that. My first book, and I thought it might be my first and only book. So it was a paranormal autobiography called In Search of the Paranormal. And then just one led to another. As it goes in publishing, it's, you know how a bank only wants to lend you money when you don't need it? In the same
Yes.
way, like, it's hard to get published the first time, and then the second time it's so much easier. You just have to break through that one time. So publishers kept offering me contracts, and I kept finding stories I wanted to tell. So I am still going, and I've contracts out for the next 2 years.
Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, the next one. It's always the next one, because the one you're working on right now, you hate, right? You always want to be writing something different. The one you're working on right now, you see its flaws, you see its imperfections, you wish you could find a better way to do it. But then once that trigger is pulled and it's out into the world for good or bad, people love it. Some people don't, and you're not writing for them. As you know, being in the public eye, there are always going to be critics, people that hate what you do. You're not working for them. And I remind myself of that every time I get a 1-star or a 2-star review. But the people that love what you do and can't wait for your next book, those are the people that love that current book. The next one, though, it is just pure potential, right? It exists in your mind. It's a concept. And then the minute you start writing that first page, you start to hating it again, and the cycle starts over and over.
Oh no, so it never gets better. What about though that moment where it's published and you get like that first copy of it, like all finished and stuff? Like that's gotta feel so cool and rewarding.
It is wonderful that this thing that you did became a thing that you hold, a tangible thing. I mean, a lot of my books, I do true crime books, I do history books, but I also do a lot of experiential books. My kind of stock in trade is I move into haunted places and I investigate them, and I write about the investigations. I interview witnesses. And so, those books, when I read one again, even when I'm editing it, I can still smell the place. And I've written Farrar Elementary, the haunted school in Iowa. I wrote a chunk of that book at the principal's desk in this dark hallway, all alone in a haunted school. And when I flip that book open, I'm right back there again, So
Yeah.
taking an experience and making it a tangible thing is very weird, but it's very precious also.
Yeah. But that's so cool to be able to spend that kind of time and to really, really get into each location. Like you said, talking to witnesses or historians and people, and then spending all that time in the location. And I just feel like you just really have like the big picture versus somebody like me who goes there for a couple of hours and has an experience and then comes back and talks about it on the podcast, you know?
Yeah, but you know, respect to podcasters, because I know a lot of people like to tear down influencers and podcasters. There's a lot of snobbery out there. And what I think is that people that are doing podcasts and TikTok and short videos, they're still storytellers. And there are some beautifully crafted creative projects out there. Just because they don't look like traditional books or traditional TV shows, you know, I think the gatekeepers are starting to die off in the storytelling field. And I love it when I can watch a 90-second YouTube video or Instagram reel or a TikTok that tells me a story from start to finish. And I think it's every bit as important craftsmanship and storytelling as writing is. It's just a different form. You know, can you
Yeah.
imagine if those tools had been around 20 years ago, I might have had a very different career.
Right. Yeah, all of us. Oh, 20 years ago? Oh my gosh, could you imagine if I was able to do like TikToks and Instagram videos and stuff from the Playboy Mansion?
Right?
Like
That would have been something else. Talk about an inside view.
it really would have been. Okay, so you do books on like ghosts and hauntings, cryptids and UFOs, military crime, true crime. I mean, military history. It might be military crime too.
It's in there.
Military history and true crime. Do you have a favorite genre?
Oh, that's a really tough question. Do you mean to write or to read?
To write or like experience, like when you're basically writing but also experiencing it and learning all about it.
Yeah, I think as much as I try and diversify, you know, the paranormal haunted houses are my thing. They've been my thing since I was a 5-year-old boy and my grandparents' house was haunted, and I grew up hearing these stories about the ghost of the old lady that would took my aunts and my uncles and my stepdad into bed when they were my age. So I've always had that love for haunted places. That's my favorite genre. And what I love above all else is that I'm fortunate I get to go back to the UK and investigate there. I was just in an old Cornish castle, in fact, in February, writing about that and living there. It was terrific. You know, how often do you get to be king of a castle for a week?
Right,
But I
I'm
get the
so
nicest
jealous.
emails from readers that say, you know, I'm probably going to never get to travel to this place. So thank you, because I felt like I was right there alongside you, experiencing these things, walking the darkened hallways, looking for ghosts, trying to connect with spirits. That's why it will always be my favorite genre, because it's so personal.
Yeah, tell me about your grandparents again, the ghost there. I want to hear that story.
Yeah, my grandfather fought in the Second World War, so he fought in Burma, and my grandmother had was one of those big kind of 1940s era families. You know, I had lots of aunts and uncles, and so she was trying to raise them all alone. And you know, we talk about strong women today. Look at the women who raised a generation. You know, while men were off fighting, and women also served in uniform. I want to add that, but you know, talk about strong women. Imagine raising a family while the Germans are bombing your city every night. And so
Yeah.
my aunts and uncles used to talk about this old lady that would come into their bedroom at night, and she would make sure that they were all tucked into bed and that everything was okay. And it never occurred to them that she wasn't like a friend of the family. You know, kids are always or often very literal. They don't necessarily think the way adults do. There was no stranger danger. So they didn't even mention it to my grandmother. And then when my grandfather came back from Burma, the kids mentioned it casually. And my grandmother was like, "What?" I was the only person in the house. So they got the kids to describe her, and they realized that this was the lady who owned the house before them, and she had died downstairs years before they moved in. And I think because a lot of hauntings, a lot of ghosts are mission or goal oriented. You know, we talk about the fact that they either come back or they stay behind for a reason. And I think she was a maternal kind of spirit, a watchful spirit, keeping an eye on the children of the house while my grandmother was, you know, so overworked and stressed. And it's very telling that once the war was over and my grandfather returned, she was never seen again.
Oh, so she was just helping your grandma out.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful, you know? It's not a
Yeah.
scary story at all, although as a kid, I was put in that same bedroom alone. And every creak and floorboard, Bridget, let me tell you, I was like half terrified that this might be the old lady coming in, but part of me, as I would pull the covers up, part of me was like, I really hope I get to see a ghost in this house. And I never
Yeah.
did. But that sent me to the library. There was no paranormal TV back then. So, you know, I had to go to the books of the great ghost hunters and that led me to write those books myself like 30 years later.
Definitely. Is that house still in your family?
No, my grandparents both passed on and it passed out of the family. So I do wonder, and I've been tempted, maybe I should knock on the door and ask. But it sounds, how do you have that conversation with a stranger, knock on the door and say, hey, not to be weird, but is this house haunted? I wouldn't know
Well,
where to start.
doesn't I know that that's not an easy conversation to just knock on someone's door, but doesn't it seem like more people over there have experiences? They live in older buildings and are more open to this type of thing?
I think it's always been that way, although it's getting more common everywhere now. But Britain is famous for its haunted pubs. I don't know if you've ever been to the UK, but every village. So you've been to a pub, and every
Yes.
pub needs to have three things to be a proper pub. It needs to have like an older man who's sitting there with one pint of beer that he nurses for 3 hours while he gives his opinions about how to fix the world. It's got to have warm beer, and it's got to have four things actually: a dog and a ghost. Like if you don't hit that checkbox, so all the pubs have ghosts. And my local pub, quite regularly, we would be sitting there having a pint. And we would hear, there are living quarters above most pubs. A lot of landlords live there. You would hear this big thud upstairs. And the landlord would just go, oh, pulling a pint, oh, Jeff's up to his old tricks again, meaning the resident ghost. And they don't bat an eyelid. But I think that over the last 20 years, and I really put this in the realm of paranormal TV, I think most Americans have become more on board with the idea of ghosts. And it used to be considered very weird. 20,
Mhm.
25 years ago, you were considered to be quite strange and not necessarily in a good way if you talked about ghosts. Now, we spend weekends and evenings like in haunted houses. Paranormal tourism is a thing.
Yeah.
Things have really changed in the last 20 years, wouldn't you say?
For sure. Drastically. And not only paranormal like tour, but even just like ghost walks in like every touristy city.
Yeah, ghost walks, and I know that there is like a flip side to it. There's good and bad along with it. It seems that some people have no qualms about opening up a haunted location, making up some of the history, exaggerating what happens, calling it the whatever demonic house, and charging $500 a night. There are definitely, let's call them what they are, charlatans out there that are doing this. But you also have places with genuine history, genuine hauntings, and the paranormal tourism is helping keep the doors open and keep the lights on and helping
Mhm.
preserve those locations for future generations to enjoy. And I really enjoy that.
Definitely. Okay, one of the books is Fox The Horrors of Fox Hollow Farm,
Mhm.
and this is being made into a show?
It is a show on Hulu right now, or I should
Oh, it's
say,
on.
it was a partial source for that show. So very, very briefly, the show is called The Fox Hollow Murders, and it focuses on the murders, but there are elements of the haunting in there. They bought the rights to my book. My book is in the show. And essentially, there was a serial killer back in the 90s called Herb Baumeister who killed a still undetermined number of men in his swimming pool while his wife was away, was out of town, right? And so then he would dispose of these bodies in the woods behind his farm. And when the police caught up with him, he fled, drove to Canada, and shot himself in the head on a beach and so on. So the house fell into kind of disrepair. A new family moved in and unsurprisingly started to see ghosts and started to experience a very aggressive haunting in that house. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have access to Fox Hollow Farm for many, many days and research and write a book about that haunting, along with the owner, Rob Graves, who is an expert on the murders themselves.
And okay, he killed them in his swimming
Mhm.
pool? Was it what are these drownings
No,
or
no, he was very much into autoerotic asphyxiation. So he would bring these men into the pool. He would ply them with alcohol, ply them with drugs. It was a very creepy scene because he had mannequins all around the side of the pool wearing like Hawaiian shirts and bathing suits and stuff like that. And the mannequins all had names and backstories. And so he would get these men that he would pick up in gay bars, men that would not be missed was his intention, men that were on the fringes of society, especially during the 1990s when the gay community was not just isolated but stigmatized. And
Mhm.
he was hoping that if they disappeared, no one would ever figure it out. He would bring them back to the pool and he would invite them to choke him during sex, and then he would return the favor, but would not stop. So he would strangle them until they were dead.
Wow. The mannequin scene, That already has me going creepy.
Yeah, mannequins are always creepy, aren't they? And the just having swam in that pool myself as part of the investigation, you're very aware of what took place in that area, and you're very aware that those poor men had no idea what was happening. It's said that this case, by the time it came to light, was the second biggest case in U.S. history of unidentified bone identification, second only to the World Trade Center. We are talking thousands of bones and bone fragments because animals got to these poor men's skeletons and they scattered them far and wide. Bones still turn up there to this day.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what was happening in the house with the new owners as far as the hauntings?
So initially, things were fairly quiet in the home, and the man of the house, Rob, doesn't believe in ghosts. He's still very, very skeptical of it. He's a very kind of literal individual, a very kind of nuts and bolts, down to earth guy. His wife, Vicky, who works in the scientific field, also, I don't know what she thought initially, but she was outside one day and she saw a young man in a red shirt walking through the trees at the side of the house. And initially, she thought it was a trespasser. So she was getting ready to call her husband to go see this guy off. And then she realized he had no legs. He was moving through the trees and walking, but only from the waist up. And as she watched, he disappeared. So it's expensive running a house like this. It's an 18-acre estate. So they brought in a lodger. And this guy was a young guy called Joe. And I think this was a catalyst, Bridget, because he was about the same age as many of the victims of the murders that had taken place at Fox Hollow. And he started immediately having terrible nightmares that he was running for his life, that he was being chased by something that was going to harm him, to kill him. And one night, Joe's walking his dog by those same trees along the driveway, and his dog suddenly alerts and runs into the trees. Joe went after the dog, and who does he run into but a young man in a red shirt who disappears right in front of his eyes. And it's only when Joe and Vicky compared notes that they realized they'd seen the same man.
And what's happening in the house that's giving that's like frightening?
I think
Is
the
it, do
most
you think
frightening
it's
thing
the
is, so
killer?
the family had two young boys, teenagers, and so they were swimming in the swimming pool. Joe was also in the pool one day. When Joe is at one end of the pool, the deep end, the boys are at the other end of the pool, and it's a big pool. There are pictures of it you can see online. There are also pictures in my book, and all of a sudden, Joe feels what feels like a hand going around his neck. And before he can turn around because he thinks he's being pranked, he is pulled under the water. Like, imagine the opening scene from Jaws. He is just
Yeah,
pulled under the water. So he comes up really angry, like, hey, that's not cool, boys. And they're still at the other end of the pool.
that is so scary.
He was out of that pool like a shot and got the boys out as well and would not go back in for quite some time. So when I investigated, the first thing that I wanted to do was get into that pool myself. And we staged a bit of a party in the pool. So I had heard from someone that knew the murderer that his favorite song was Blue Bayou by Linda Ronstadt. So we got the mood lighting going on in there, and I got my iTunes library up and I started playing that song. It was very eerie, very creepy. I
It
have
would
voice
be.
recorders running around the pool. I'm swimming, so a near naked guy swimming in the pool, bunch of paranormal investigators all around, and I played back the audio recorders, and very clearly you hear a male voice whisper one word, and the word is Laura, which is my wife's name.
Why do you think that would be?
I almost wonder if it was an attempt to intimidate.
Oh,
Because there is, to my knowledge, no Laura connected with the case itself. But the pool room is off to the side of the pool. It houses the machinery, the filtration stuff that all pools have. So we investigated in there, and everybody was on camera. We have a video camera running, so I know this was not a person that was with me. And it was quite hot, and I remember it being very kind of, muggy and confined in there, very, very kind of sweaty. And all of a sudden, I feel along the underside of my tricep that kind of caress, like somebody taking their fingertips. And initially, I thought, is that a spider? Which is the most terrifying thing. And so I look at the recording. Nope, nothing there. Nothing touched me. I felt, as I'm telling you this now, I can feel it. It was fingertips on my bare skin. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever experienced.
wow. That is really anytime you're touched, like I've had a few touches too, and it just makes it so real.
Well, and so secondary to that, but the pool room was very cold. It has a cement floor. And it's said that that is where the murderer, Herb Baumeister, would leave the body of his victim before he took it out into the woods to dismember it and try and dispose of it. And that's important because one day Rob, who works at a car dealership, a friend of his from work, a colleague, came to visit him and, just to look around the house. The guy knew the story, but he also brought his young kid with him. Now, you don't tell young kids stories about, things like that. You just don't.
Yeah.
So they go down to the pool, and the kiddo is like, "Oh, pool, fantastic." When you're a kid, that's fun. So Rob and his friend are just talking under their breath quietly, and the kiddo walks to the pool room door, which is open, and turns and goes, "Shh, the man is sleeping in there." And the friend was like, "Okay, gotta go." Grabbed his kid and left with like a squeal of rubber, never to return to Fox Hollow Farm.
What location did you say where this is, this house?
Yeah, it's in Carmel, Indiana.
Indiana. Okay. That is so crazy. You started investigating back in the 90s, right?
Mhm.
What type of places did you go to back then?
Well, it was very different than it is now. And again, I think this is because there was no paranormal TV. And also in the UK, we don't do demons like they do in the US. We don't have that culture. So I wandered a lot around a lot of manor houses, stately homes, castles, places that were hundreds
Oh,
of years old. And
yeah, because you were over there, so you had a plethora of amazing places.
right, but investigation back then was really a bunch of folks walking around with tape recorders, going, "Yes, this is where the lady in white is said to glide through the ballroom," And then I came to the US, and everybody is like, "Demon!" It was a very different vibe, and I really liked the British cases because so few of them were frightening or terrifying. The smaller cases, I would get help cases, and it would be someone that maybe bought a house, and the last tenants to live there were, let's say, an old couple, an elderly couple, senior citizens who had both died in the house. And maybe they bought that house when they were young. They'd had kids. They'd raised kids there. Kids went, had kids of their own. They became grandparents. And so there are generations and decades of love went into this house, a family home. And then the new tenants come in and the house is haunted. But rather than anything frightening, maybe they smell the whiff of his cigar smoke or the lilacs, her perfume, just those lingering things. There'd be footsteps in empty rooms. And I would talk with the family members and they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, that was the way that dad used to go to his study, or mom used to go to her crafting room or whatever." It was all very nice and very friendly and very peaceful. There were very few of those kind of dark and scary cases, although I did get to investigate the Tower of London and the Clink, the oldest prison in the UK, and the Cage Witches prison. So I did get to do some of those cases too.
Wait, you actually did an investigation at the Tower of London?
Very, very minimal because getting access was a nightmare. So I was lucky that I got some very limited behind the scenes time. But I got to talk with the yeoman warders who, they call them beef eaters, which they're not big fans of. But people don't realize, they kind of look like comedy characters, don't they? Cartoon characters. Every
Mhm.
one of them has an extensive military history. To get that job, you have to spend at least 22 years of your life in military service, flawless conduct. So we are looking at men and women who are like Royal Marines commandos, and special forces and stuff like that. They are the queens, now the kings. Secret service, really. They protect the monarch as well. So they're all law enforcement officers. And the point is, Bridget, these are not men and women who are given to making up ghost stories. But almost all of them have a story, usually after dark when they're making the rounds of the tower, because the tower's very busy in the day,
Mhm.
and lots of tourists, lots of hustle, lots of bustle, and it's right in the heart of London. But then at night, when things get quiet and the tourists go home and there are very few people around, the tower takes on a very eerie character.
Yeah. That would be so cool to go there. I mean, I've been there obviously as a tourist
Mhm.
during regular hours and stuff, but I mean, just the history and then the stuff that they have on display there, like they have a whole room with like torture
Mhm.
devices.
Yeah, they do, and the tower was used for that for many years. The story that I found most compelling, you've heard about the princes in the tower, who were supposedly the young boys that were in line for the throne, and then Richard III, it's thought, had them assassinated and disappeared, and nobody knew what happened. And hey, Richard III became the king, so that worked well for him. Anyway, a few years later, they were knocking through under a staircase in the tower and they found the bones of two young boys that were the same age. And they buried them in
Yeah.
Westminster Abbey, but it's never been proven that they were the princes or not. Fast forward about
Really?
500 years to modern times, and I was talking with a yeoman warder, and I'm like, "Come on, mate, what's the creepiest thing that's happened to you in there?" And he said, "Well, one night I'm doing my rounds, and he took his young son with him on his rounds. And again, this guy's like a combat veteran, someone that's trustworthy and solid. He said, I'm making my rounds, and my son was kind of lagging behind in the bloody tower. And he's like, come on, son, let's go. And he's like, but Dad, I'm playing with the boys. And of course, no boys were there. So Dad picked him up and he's like, and off we go.
Wow. Yeah. Oh, it would be so amazing to do an investigation there.
Yeah, I wish I'd had, anything resembling like true behind the scenes access, but that just doesn't happen. So all I got to do was some EVP work and some interviews, I'm afraid. But my goodness, I would give my right arm to spend a night locked in the Tower of London.
What about have you been to Hampton Court?
I haven't. The whole Henry VIII thing's fascinating. Have you been?
Yes, and you can just feel it. As soon as you're there, it's haunted. There's no question.
Well, let me ask you then, because I'd love your opinion, but you've seen that famous Henry VIII ghost video, I'm assuming, where he comes smashing
Yes.
through the doors.
Yes.
Do you think that's genuine or not? Because I always wondered.
I feel like it's too good to be true.
Yeah, in this field, if it looks too good to be true, it usually is, isn't it? But
Well, I want it to be true, but I feel like it's too good to be true.
yeah, I kind of tend to agree with you on that. Like, it's so good, it's so clear, it's hard to accept that it's real.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know. I really don't know.
But so many of Britain's royal palaces and castles have their ghosts. I said that every pub has one. Boy, does every, palace and castle. So Glamis Castle in Scotland, home of the Queen Mother as it used to be, well known for having a secret room and supposedly the monster of Glamis. And then they have cool stories. The devil is supposed to have turned up at the door one night and played cards with the Earl. I mean, there's all this rich folklore that goes back so many years. The Skirridin in Wales, it's supposed to be one of the oldest, if not the oldest, inns in Wales. And I was lucky to spend several days writing a book about that place, investigating there. And they have what's called the Devil's Cup. And it is this like tankard that sits above the fireplace. And every night, the landlord used to fill this cup and leave it outside the front door of the inn for the devil to come by, have a drink, and leave the inn alone. It was basically a bribe to the Prince of Darkness. And they did this for hundreds of years. It became a tradition. So the Devil's Cup would get filled every night. And I asked the landlord, I'm like, do you still do that? And he said, no, not really. We've stopped doing it because the cup would always be empty the next morning. And maybe the devil came for his drink. Or maybe there is just a badger or a fox wandering around that's completely hammered. We'll never know unless we put a camera out, right?
Right.
But again, I like, probably too good to be true. I like the idea of the devil coming for a drink at this old pub. More likely there's some, nocturnal critter that is getting absolutely trashed on free drink while they were still leaving it out.
I think so. And why won't somebody put a camera out and see what's happening?
But then you spoil the fun, right? You spoil the myth.
I need to know.
Yeah, I think, though, I would bet money on it being the latter explanation, Bridget. I hate to say it.
I think so, too. That reminds me, too, just first of all, I wanted to ask you, are you very versed on Scottish ghost stories?
Somewhat, yeah.
Because I went to Scotland for the first time back in October. I think it was October. And I really wanted to do an episode on Scottish ghost stories, and especially Edinburgh. That's where we stayed. And I was looking for somebody who would talk to me. I asked my tour guide from Mercat Tours if they would do it. He said yes. And then they got back to me and said, no, he's not allowed to do it. And we don't believe in that kind of stuff. I literally took their ghost tour. Like, what?
Did you get to Mary King's Close, the vaults and places like that?
Yes, I went to all of that. And nobody will talk to me. Well, nobody will talk to me on air about it.
I've got a recommendation for you, so let's talk afterwards.
Yeah, yes, let's do that. Okay, perfect. And then my other question, too, is the Brown Lady ghost.
Raynham Hall?
I mean, that's like a famous old ghost story. Yes.
Yeah, the Raynham Hall ghost.
Have you been there?
I've not been to Raynham Hall. The story's a fascinating one, and it's one of the classic ghost photographs, isn't it? And
Yes.
supposedly she was so realistic, so lifelike that Captain Marryat, the naval officer and author, fired a pistol right through her. Which that sounds like, by the way, the most American way of testing if something's a ghost, right? No, hearing a Brit doing that is really, really odd. Like, I would always imagine a British person would be something, I say, who are you and what are you doing in here? Are you alive or are you not? But this guy took a shot at her and it went right through her, apparently. It's a fascinating story. Again, the thing that bothers me about that photograph, like you said earlier, is it's so good. It's almost too good to be true.
Yeah. But that was a long time ago, right? When that I
It
forget
was,
what
but
year.
double exposures were still a thing, you know? I mean, look at what William Mumler did. And that was long beforehand. So the truth is it's impossible to say for sure without seeing the original plates. Could be genuine,
Yeah.
could be a fake. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay. So we've talked a lot about British ghost stories. What about Colorado?
Oh yeah, I have a good friend that writes books about strange Colorado, Erin Taylor, the author, and you should, by the way, have her on the show. She's superb. Anyway,
Okay.
yeah, Colorado has some great ghost stories. I used to give ghost tours at the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, which, as I'm sure you know, was the inspiration for The Shining. And when I took that job, I did it primarily because I just wanted to get behind the scenes, And I thought, this is a tourist trap, surely. There's no way this place is as active as the rumors say. And it absolutely is. And, to give them credit, they did not tolerate anybody making up stories. There was no fakery involved. And in 3 years, I saw and heard so much stuff. It's almost beyond belief. Footsteps on the floor of the concert hall, photographs of shadow figures in rooms that we knew to be empty because I was standing right there. You name it, Stanley has it. My favorite, I think, was the topmost floor. People complain about kids running up and down that hallway at all hours of the day and night. And they do it even when there are no kids in the hotel.
Wow.
Mm,
Yeah. Do you know where the Stanley stands right now as far as paranormal? Because
yeah.
they were all in, and then I heard they were like, "Nope, we're
So
not into this
let me
anymore."
be real clear that I do not in any way, shape, or form speak for the owners of the Stanley Hotel. I'm no longer employed there simply because I did 3 years. COVID happened, and as a paramedic, I got very busy very quickly. And I love the hotel, and I'm happy to go back there anytime. So I don't speak for them. My understanding is that they do ghost tours, but they are not receptive to ghost hunts and ghost hunters. And it's fair to say that this is partly because not all of the people who went there waving K2 meters around at 2 o'clock in the morning were very well behaved,
Yeah.
So it's usually there's someone that ruins it for all of us, right? And I think that happened often enough. It played into their decision to no longer do those kind of things, which is a shame because it is a very active location.
Right. You said footsteps and kids running. What other things did you experience there?
Yeah. So shadow figure photographs. There was
Oh, yeah.
a lady that I was with on my tour took a picture in one of the mirrors in the concert hall, and there was a shadowy figure standing behind her. And I know this wasn't faked because I was standing off to one side watching her take the picture. There's no way it could have been digitally manipulated. We had people touched. On one of my tours, there was a guy. So on those ghost tours, usually two types of people. There's a paranormal enthusiast, people like us, and then their significant other. And I could always tell because the body language was this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I would try and make friends with them because hey, I wanted to get tipped. And I'd be like, look, we have a whiskey bar with 1,000 whiskeys here in the hotel. So, ma'am, because it usually was the ma'am that was the interested party and the guy that was the skeptic. Not always, but usually. I'd say, ma'am, after this tour, do us a favor, go buy him 2 or 3 whiskeys because he's got to listen to me for the next hour. There'd be laughs, we'd all be friends, off we'd go. So this one guy was so big, like he was like bodybuilder big, no fat. He must have weighed 300 pounds, all muscle, no neck. So I was talking to the guy on the tour, and he's like, "Yeah, I don't believe all this stuff, but I'm keeping my girlfriend here happy." And I said, "What do you do for a living, mate?" And he's like, I'm in the army. I'm in the U.S. military." I'm like, "Great, thanks for your service." Anyway, we get down to the basement of the concert hall, and this guy suddenly changes. He's like, and he starts sweating, like scared sweating. I'm like, "Are you all right?" And he went, "You'll never believe me." And I'm like, I'm a tour guide at the most haunted hotel in America. Try me. And he said, somebody, like a kid, just grabbed my ankle. Like a child's hand just grabbed my ankle. I felt it. And I just laughed and I said, yeah, welcome to the Stanley. That happens all the time. And it was funny because his whole worldview changed like that. I watched a guy come on a tour, and 90 minutes after, his life just expanded. The borders expanded. He went from denying that this was a thing. I don't think he slept much that night. Let's put it like that.
Probably not.
Yeah.
I wish I had something that profound that happened to me there. I had little things that I wasn't even sure, or didn't even take in as paranormal at the time, but now thinking back on it, maybe they were. But it was just like rushing to get ready. We were meeting family downstairs in the restaurant for dinner, and so I plugged my curling iron in while I was going to jump in the shower really quick, so it would be hot when I got out. And I got out, dry off really quick, go to grab the curling iron, and it's cold. I was like, thought I'd turn this on. So I turn it on, I run and go do something else really quick and come back to curl my hair, and it's off. And this happened like 3 or 4 times, and then to the point where it wouldn't even turn on anymore. So I was like, the curling iron must have went bad. That's just my luck, right? When I need it, it went bad, no warning, no nothing. And so I picked up another curling iron later on the trip. And when I got home, I plugged it in just one more time to see like what was wrong with it or whatever. And it was working fine. And it worked fine for years.
Did anything else work in that outlet?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We tried that out too. Yeah. The hairdryer worked fine.
Huh, how odd. Maybe somebody didn't want you curling your hair.
They want straight hair there.
Straight hair only.
No, I think it was just a way to try and get my attention, but I was just rushing and not paying attention to that, and definitely not thinking it had anything to do with paranormal.
Do you remember which floor it was?
I'm pretty sure it was the second floor.
The most active floor.
And it was our view was looking right out the front of the hotel. And I remember there was a wedding going to be going on right in the front. And I was like, oh, wow, that's crazy that they do it literally right smack dab in the front of the hotel. And I was looking down our window and I could see all the chairs being set out.
It wasn't room 217, was it? The Stephen King room?
I don't think so, because I think I tried to have that room and I don't think I had it.
Okay. But still, that's a great, yeah. Second floor competes with the fourth floor for being the most active.
I mean, I should double check if it was 217, because the Stanley set this up for me.
Well.
And invited me.
And it would fit. If it was 217, I think I know why it happened.
Really?
So 217 is supposedly haunted by the ghost of Miss Wilson, who was a long-term housekeeper at the hotel. And although there are some false stories out there that she was killed in a big gas explosion the Stanley had, that's not quite true. There was a big explosion in room 217 100 and something years ago. Miss Wilson was blown through the floor into the concert hall downstairs, but she survived. Seriously injured, but she survived. And she did indeed go back to work at the Stanley, and she worked there for many years. She's the ghost, though, that haunts room 217. And she gives, this is a personal question, so I apologize, but were you with a companion in that room?
Yes.
Were you married?
No.
This is it. So Miss Wilson is fine with married couples. She does not like either single men or unmarried couples in that room. And she makes her displeasure known. Old-fashioned Victorian values. When the Stanley opened, the building next door, which is like the lodge. It's a mini version of the Stanley. That's where the single men stayed. In the main hotel, for the longest time, only married couples were permitted to stay because, we've got to be proper and do things a certain way, right, Bridget? It's not respectable otherwise. So we have stories of people in 217 that are unmarried, and they'll come back from having lunch and their case has been packed and left outside the room. Like Miss Wilson will generally show her displeasure to unmarried couples. So if it was 217, I'm willing to bet she took some exception with, she doesn't like women in makeup, women showing a certain amount of skin in their clothing. She would not she would not approve of skirts. She would not approve of any neckline that's lower than this. Victorian values. And call me old-fashioned. I can't really see you wearing that kind of gear at a night at the Stanley.
No, I'm checking all her boxes, that's for sure.
You certainly would have. So that might be her nicest way of saying, hey, straighten up, young lady, and do things respectfully. We hear that a lot from the hotel.
You know what? I'm thinking I don't have confirmation on this, but I'm thinking it may have been 217 because not only
Mhm.
did the hotel set it up for me, but they left me, and this was so cool, in the room, a bottle of red rum and like two little shot
Mhm.
glasses. And like there were things, you know what I
Yeah,
mean, that referenced Stephen King and the hotel
that would
and
make sense. And then that's the room he famously stayed in when he had the nightmare which inspired The Shining.
yeah,
So perhaps you had an encounter with the Stanley's most famous resident ghost.
I love it. What do you think of the Estes method since we're talking about Estes Park?
Yeah, let's give a big shout out to the Stanley Paranormal Investigation team. So Carl Pfeiffer, Connor Randall, and their colleagues who really pioneered that. That's why it's called the Estes method. If I had a nickel for every person that misunderstood and said, "Hey, we're doing the Estep method," it's nothing to do with me at all. It's called Estes, not Estep, because it's Estes Park where the Stanley is.
Mhm.
And you can see some of their videos online. I think they did some pioneering work. They weren't necessarily the first to do that, but they certainly popularized this idea of listening to spirit boxes and communicating with them. So I think it's a great technique, and I think its popularity is a testament to where they started using it consistently and regularly when they had the Stanley as their playground. Not to
Mhm.
not disrespectfully, maybe laboratory is a better way to put it.
What were their names again?
Uh, the two that I recall are Carl Pfeiffer and Connor Randall. And I know that they
Okay.
had colleagues on the team whose names escape me right now, and I apologize in advance to them because I can't remember them.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously, I know that it had to have originated at the Stanley and being called the Estes method and everything, but I feel like I've heard people, different names take claim to starting it, and so I'm so curious, like who I do like giving people credit for like coming up with these things. It reminds me very much of are you familiar with like the Gansfield
I
experiments that
am.
they used to do? It remind like as soon as I heard about this, I immediately correlated those 2 things. I'm like, "Oh, it's like the same thing
So
almost."
sensory deprivation in an attempt to communicate or in an attempt to experience something paranormal is not new. And I don't think I've ever heard them say, we take ownership of this or anything like that. I think their work and they're putting it out there for the public to appreciate, though, they definitely popularized this method and they did some pioneering work with it. So I like to see them get credit for it. Um,
Yeah,
and I think calling it the Estes method is a testament to that.
for
I'm
sure.
certainly grateful to them.
Yeah, and just in case the listeners don't know, the Gansfield was like this was popular in like parapsychology, and they would put something over the eyes. They were actually cutting like
Ping pong balls.
ping pong balls, yeah, and taping them over the eyes, and they put a red light up, and you would be like locked in a room, and then it was more for like ESP
Mhm.
and things like that. They would try and guess like what somebody was looking at in another room, so they would be looking at maybe cards that were different colors or had different numbers on them, and they would be saying red, blue, 2, whatever, trying to like, and then they were testing like ESP and telepathy and those kinds of things.
And I'm always wary because sensory deprivation is an interesting technique, but the senses don't do well when they're too deprived. They like to play tricks on us as well, which is why when I do an Estes method, I like to run a splitter and record, the raw output as well. So when the person says what they're hearing, we can go back and check that with the master from the recorded version. That's probably the
Yeah.
best way to do it. There's still a degree of subjectivity there, but as I'm sure you've experienced, I've had some absolutely unbelievable Estes sessions in my career, and it continues to fascinate me as a tool.
It really, yeah, it's very, very cool. You mentioned a little bit about Farrar earlier.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, I think Sam and Colby now own Farrar, but prior to that, the last owners they invited me, allowed me to have access so that I could write and research a book about it. It is a schoolhouse, an elementary school in rural Iowa, and it's been on a couple of TV shows. I think John E.L. Tenney and Chad Lindbergh really brought the attention of this to everybody with Ghost Stalkers with their show. And since then, it's been on other shows like Kindred Spirits, but it's a haunted schoolhouse. And what's interesting to me is that it doesn't have this tortured history that so many locations that are haunted do. So why would it be so active? And there's a lot of debate and discussion about that in the field. And I think, especially speaking as a bullied kid, I think your school days can be the happiest days of your life, or they can be the most miserable. And for me, they were
Mm,
definitely like not fun. So I think a lot of either positive or negative emotion and energy gets imprinted on a school. And I think that when a school is abandoned or is closed down, some of that remains behind. And I know that several schools like Post Town Elementary have their Glenbeulah School as well. They have their hauntings. They have their ghost stories. You don't need to have a death to have a ghost.
right. Right. Just a lot of energy.
Yeah.
Because you're a paramedic, I do want to ask you some stories about that. Have you ever experienced anything? Because, like, I heard this one story one time where somebody was saying he was like or maybe it was a video. It might have been a video where this cop went to the scene of like a car accident and he literally saw like the spirit raise up. And I feel like there's like a video or like something, and you see something move out of this body that looks like a ghost lifting out of it. Have you ever had a weird something you can't explain or paranormal experience like that on a call?
I'm really sorry to disappoint you, but no. And there's a reason. So number one, I'm not sensitive. But I did 2 seasons of Paranormal 911 on TV. I did 5 seasons of Haunted Hospitals. And we met lots of providers that did have those stories and those experiences. Lots of patients, nurses, doctors, cops, paramedics, firefighters. My focus when I'm working, though, it's my job to stand between the patient and whatever is killing them. So my focus is on them 100%. You could parade a ghostly Roman legion through my 911 scene and I wouldn't see it. So I think it's just because I'm so focused on the patient themselves. But I do have colleagues, and I have heard many stories of people in my field that do. I if I'm glad that I'm not a sensitive or a psychic, or call it what you will, a medium. I don't know how I would get my job done if I were. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do know people that claim to be.
What about hospitals? Do you think those are haunted?
So many hospitals have ghost stories. And I wrote a book 10 years ago called The World's Most Haunted Hospitals, which is how I ended up working on the show Haunted Hospitals. And it's rare that I meet a nurse that doesn't have a ghost story. And I think it's because nurses are very practical. Doctors sometimes have them, but doctors are often more skeptical. But it never fails, Bridget. Nurses will come up to me and they'll say, "Oh, hey, Richard, guess what happened last night? We had a patient die, and then the doors on the third floor kept opening themselves. We would have call buttons go in empty rooms, things like that." Nurses just take it for granted. Doctors will go, "Ha, I'm a man or a woman of science. I have a scientific education. I went to medical school. I don't believe in this kind of rubbish." And then they'll go, "But this one time." And they'll tell me how they saw like a dead colleague of theirs, and I'm like, "How do you explain that, Doc?" And they'll go, "Just one of those things." You're like, "No, you don't get to say, I am grounded in science and I understand the way the universe works. There are no ghosts, but I'm seeing dead people." You don't get to do that. So nurses are so practical, and doctors are a little bit different.
Yeah, that's so funny. Well, thank you so much for doing the show today. Tell everybody listening how they can follow you, buy your books, follow you on social media, all that good stuff. Watch your shows.
Sure thing. You can see most of my shows on Discovery Plus, Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal 911. Fox Hollow Murders is on Hulu right now in the US, and Disney Plus, scarily, in the rest of the world. You can find my books at Amazon, of course, but your local bookstore, independently owned mom and pop shop, can also order them in, and we should support them. Come see me online, richardestep.net, Estep Writes on TikTok, Richard Estep Author on Facebook, and I just love hearing from people. So thanks for having me on, Bridget. It's always a pleasure.
Yes. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Ghost Bunny podcast. Thank you so much for joining me on my spooky adventures, and I look forward to sharing a new ghost story with you each week. Please subscribe to my podcast so you're always the first to know when a new episode is out, and follow me on social media at Ghost Bunny Podcast on Instagram and at Ghost Bunny Podcast on YouTube. And I'm working on that Patreon. Thank you for being patient with me. Maybe Richard and I can go on an investigation together and put that on there.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye, guys.